Okay, the Energy Act of 2020 defined critical non-fuel minerals as those that are essential to economic or national security and that have a supply chain that is vulnerable to disruption. The current list includes 50 substances, and the focus of this talk is going to be on the elements shown in red, which constitutes the rare earth elements. Critical minerals are key for computers, national defense applications, medical applications, green energy industries, just to name a few. For example, your cell phone alone includes at least 17 critical minerals, and then please note that the rare earth elements are needed for multiple components of your phone. This graphic clearly shows why the US and other countries are deeply concerned about the rare earth element supply. 80% of the rare earths used in the US are imported from China. An even more disturbing note is that China is currently buying rare earth element rights in Africa and Southeast Asia. This is not a great decisions talk here. Okay. Well, what are the rare earth elements? Okay, it's a group of 15 chemical elements that range from 57 to 71 in atomic number, plus these two lighter ones up here because they have chemical similarities to the other elements. All but one are critical minerals. Promethium is not because of its extremely low concentration in the Earth's crust. Of these 17 remaining, 4 account for 90% of the global market of rare earths. These are the so-called magnet rare earths that are essential for the production of the high-performance permanent magnets used in electric vehicles, wind turbines, defense systems, hard drives, and cell phones. Rare earths can also be divided into the light and heavy rare earths depending on their electron configuration. How rare is a rare earth element in the Earth's crust? Well, for perspective, let's look at the abundance of sodium, a common element you know from table salt. And then let's look at an element that many of you are probably wearing right now, gold. So you can see the vast difference in the abundance in the Earth's crust. Well, where does a rare earth fit into this? Let's look at neodymium, one of the most commonly used magnet rare earths. It has an abundance 1,000 times more than gold. And if we look at all the rare earths in average, they have abundances in the Earth's crust similar to nickel, lead, copper, and tin. Well, some magmas have small amounts of rare earth elements, but in order to make an economic deposit, we have to concentrate them. The crystal structures of all rock forming minerals want relatively small positive ions with charges of +1 or +2. Well, the rare earths are rather large, and they have a charge of +3. So very few rare earth elements go into common rock-forming minerals. So as the melt continues to crystallize, these rare earths become more and more concentrated in the melt. Eventually, uncommon mineral phases will form that can accommodate these incompatible elements and that form from the magma or associated hydrothermal fluids. Most of the rare earths mined today come from 3 minerals: bastnäsite, xenotime, or monazite. There's one other common ore that forms for rare earths, and those are ionic clays. In these, the rare earths are actually not part of the crystal structure, but are loosely bonded to the edges and the inner plain spaces of clay minerals. Although rare earths, as we've seen, are not really rare compared to some minerals in the Earth's crust, economic concentrations only occur in uncommon geologic settings. I only have time to talk about the two that provide most of the rare earths today. Carbonatites are igneous rocks that are formed from carbonate-rich magmas derived from the upper mantle. They are the world's main source of light rare earths. The largest mine is in China. The second largest in the world is shown here, Mountain Pass Mine in California. The main ore is bastnäsite. Carbonatites account for 65% of China's production and all of the production in the US, Australia, and Finland. Ionic clay occurs in thick deposits of laterite soil developed through subtropical weathering of rare earth element-rich bedrock. During the weathering process, rare earths are released from the parent rock and are adsorbed and concentrated by clays in the weathering profile. Currently, all large mining operations of ionic clay are in China, but many others have been identified in numerous parts of the world in tropical and subtropical latitudes. Ionic clay accounts for 35% of China's total production and roughly 80% of the heavy rare earth elements in the world. Just a quick look at other currently mined and potential future sources. The ones marked with an asterisk are those that have some current small production. There's another type of igneous rock that's rich in monazite and xenotime, which is rich in the heavy rare earths. There are also sands derived from these rocks. These are currently mined in China. One of the problems with monazite sands is they often have, besides rare earths, they have the highly toxic radioactive element thorium. Right now, China, as they mine it, are separating thorium and they're stockpiling it for future use in thorium-based nuclear power. Mining waste piles from the existing mine. There are small operations now that do this in Malaysia. This could be an advantage because you don't have to do any new mining. You just use the waste piles of existing mines. There is recycling. It's now less than 1% of the global production, but many research is going into trying to really up this game. Other places, other sources that have identified high concentrations in places are coal, coal ash, coal shales, deep sea mud. And another thing they're really looking at is don't use rare earths. Find a common element and that can perform the same chemical functions. And they have been successful in in some applications for this. Okay, this graph shows the rare earth mine production in metric tons along the y-axis for the years 1960 to 2012. The United States was the main producer of rare earth elements between 1965 and 1985, producing a maximum of 40,000 metric tons. After this, as you see, China really takes off in production, and between 2005 and 2010, they were basically the sole producer of rare earths with a whopping 140,000 metric tons. But look what's happened since. Yes, minor production has come in from other countries, but that is not what is important on this graph. We have more than doubled the amount of rare earths mined since 2012 to a staggering amount in 2022, which has only gotten worse, 350,000 metric tons in 2023. Supply cannot keep up with this demand at this rate of increase. Yes, there are lots of estimated reserves of rare earths in the world, a minimum of 130 million metric tons. However, just because these reserves have been identified doesn't mean that they can be developed in time to avoid a shortfall in supply. It takes at least 5 to 10 years from beginning planning to actually producing a base ore. Mining is not the only concern about the rare earth element supply. More than 85% of the processing of rare earth ore into usable rare earth compounds takes place in China. The first U.S. facility to process opened in 2023 and is expected to reach its full capacity this year. Another facility is expected to open next year. 90% of the manufacture of metal alloys and permanent magnets takes place in China. The first U.S. facility to manufacture magnets and other rare earth products recently opened, and more are under construction. The Department of Defense states that they are on track to have a sustainable mine-to-magnet supply chain capable of supporting all U.S. defense requirements by 2027. And maybe there'll be enough for your phones and iPads too. Thank you.
Now, we finished quite a bit early, so we do have time for questions. Yeah, Wayne, why don't you come close so that we can answer any questions people might have. Also, at lunchtime, the Great Decisions Group will be meeting again, and the hot topic right now is negotiating in sovereignty without the country that you're negotiating about. So, in case you haven't known, Ukraine is not part of the negotiations going on right now in Saudi Arabia between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Hi there. Rare earth elements. You mentioned that there were heavy rare earth elements and light rare earth elements, and I'm assuming that has to do with the number of electrons that they have. But what are they? Can you give us their names? And also, what are the specific categories that each one is used for? They must be used for different things, or there wouldn't be a distinction.
There are, it's on their electron configuration, and the funny thing about the rare earths is as the atomic number goes up, the atomic radius shrinks because they fill their electron shells in a very peculiar way. So the heavy rare earths, yes, they actually are atomic numbers higher. There are two that are magnets, that there are two light rare earths that are also they're used in magnets. So they have multiple purposes. I'm not sure for the heavy rare earths if there are specific alloys or uses for a specific element, and they may fall into the heavy rare earths. But I don't think that there's a. It's probably to do with their chemistry, with their their electron configuration is different, and they may add different things to metals or ceramics, one way. But that's all I know about those. Sorry.
Yes.
Hi, this is a question for Vicki, and I'm wondering how much of the future of rare earth metals is in our landfills?
They could be mined. I mean, they're actually waste mining, right? It's going back through. So they, if you portion off the areas of landfill that have been used, say in the last 20 years, when we've been throwing away cell phones and tablets and things, where you might be able to. So they could probably, they are recycling now. They need, obviously, well, we can't even recycle plastics, but they have some techniques to recycle. So yes, they could go through, plus that places that have the electronic research, if they're burying those in separate places, going through those, they could probably, mine things. One of the things I couldn't talk about was the environmental problems of rare earth mining, which are extreme, and that's why China is now trying to buy up. They bought lots of deposits in Africa and Southeast Asia because their own citizens are finally getting really angry at the toxicity and the destruction of the environment for these ionic clays especially. And so they decided, well, we'll just go mine in Africa and other countries, and where we just buy up the thing, we'll buy their things and they're letting us do it, so, yeah.
This is Bob. I want to share, there was a PBS program on the genetics of ancient species, and we could go back 50,000 years or something like that and sequence those. Then they did a shotgun sequencing. Barbara and I saw this program just a week or so ago, and they can go back 2 million years now. And what they discovered, is they could recreate the entire environment from those fragments. The entire environment, the ecosystem. And it was Greenland was where they were doing it. So if you want to check that out. I have a question it's kind of yours, Vicki, but I've often been interested in, given stellar nucleosynthesis, why elements, especially the rarer elements, concentrate in certain places. And I've never found a work that really discusses that in any detail as an overview. And my question is, in the area of these rare earth elements, is there a study of why are they there? Why are they there in those formations? And are we working, is the science of that under development right now?
Most of the melts that that are richer in rarer elements come from melting in the upper mantle, as opposed to the lower crust, or even in the middle crust. The mantle is not homogeneous. The mantle is very heterogeneous in its chemical composition. So this melt from the upper mantle may not have that much rare earths. Another one might be slightly more concentrated. And so not every melt is going to have a relatively high percentage of rare earths. Relatively high, means they might be, a couple hundred ppm, which is actually pretty high compared to many elements on the Earth's crust. So they have an idea where they come from, but there's no information on why, these will melt more than these over here in the upper mantle. They don't think that the melting has anything to do with the composition. So that having rare earths doesn't mean that it's going to cause, an increased probability of melting in that part of the mantle. So, yeah.